Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Literature with Lydia podcast. Happy Bookmas. My name is Lydia, and I'm so excited to have you here today. And if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, things might look kind of different, and specifically look, because now I have video. I never considered doing a video podcast before, but then I thought maybe it would be kind of fun to try it during Bookmas, and so that's exactly what I'm going to do. And so we'll see how it goes, if I enjoy doing it, if I feel it's something feasible for like the long term, then I might end up making Literature with Lydia a video podcast moving forward. But I figure this is a great way to kind of test it. And why not? The holidays are so fun. So yeah, we're going to try it. If you're watching on video, let me know what you think. And yeah, I'm just really excited to get started. I did Bookmas for the first time on the podcast last year, the first year that I had the podcast, and I just figured what's something new to kind of spice it up a little bit. So here we are. In today's episode of Bookmas, I'm going to be sharing with you my book recommendations and my TBR specifically for winter books. And so I have an episode later on that's going to be all about like cozy book recommendations. That one is going to be geared toward books that are not necessarily just like centered around the holidays. However, this episode, they're all like Hallmark-esque, rubbing winter in your face kind of book recommendations. And I just felt that was the perfect way to get Bookmas started off. So let's get into my own recommendations for you. It would not be a Bookmas episode, nor an episode about the holidays without me mentioning my favorite winter book ever, and that is Faking Christmas by Cindy Steele. I love this book. Not only is it one of my favorite holiday reads, it also is one of my favorite reads just in general, and I think it's brilliant. I think it's perfect. I've actually interviewed Cindy Steele on the podcast before, and it was a blast. Truly such a good book. This, like I said earlier, Hallmark in a book, that is the definition of this one. But not only is it like cheesy and cute and like has some similar tropes that you'd find in a Hallmark movie, it also has a lot of heart and depth to it. And it's very easy to feel very connected to the characters. Stunning, perfect. I've read it every year. I don't know if I'll read it again this year simply because I read it on July 25th, Christmas in July this year. And so I don't know if I'll read it again this year, but if you haven't read it before, I highly recommend. Last year, she actually came out with a special edition of the book, which I also got. My parents gave it to me for Christmas, which was so kind. And it's cute because Cindy, the author, actually like annotated this book, and so there are some of her thoughts throughout about like what the writing process was like, and I just love that. Also, this is just so stunning. So that is my first winter book recommendation. Another one that I have to mention is Lovelight Farms by B.K. Borison. I feel like this is such a classic winter read, and it's friends to lovers, which, if you don't know, is my favorite trope. And it takes place in a small town, which she has 4 books in the series, and each book takes place in a different season. This is the first book, takes place during Christmas time, and it's the sweetest story about 2 friends who realize that there's a little bit something more there, and they fall in love. But you get to know the other members of the small town who later come into play in the other books, and I love a small town cozy read. Now, my other recommendations I do not have as physical copies because I listen to them as an audiobook through Hoopla. I recommend checking to see if your own library apps have these books available, specifically Hoopla, if your library does have Hoopla. The first one that I'm going to mention is The Christmas You Found Me by Sarah Morgenthaler. This is a really sweet story. It's very found family. Our main character, Sienna, lives in this small town, and a guy comes by. Literally, his name is Guy, but his last name is Maple. So how much more Christmas can you get? And he's a single dad. Love it. and his daughter is in need of a kidney transplant, but they are really low on money, and so he's kind of doing what he can around the town to save enough money to be able to afford this procedure for his daughter. Again, very found family. It's really cool to see the town come together, and I really enjoyed not only our main characters, but also the supporting characters within the story as well. Next, we have Snowed In for Christmas by Sarah Morgan. This book follows a couple different family members in the Miller family, and it kind of follows their story while they're snowed in during the holidays. Something that Sarah Morgan does really well is she dives into characters, and not just one, multiple, but then eventually you see how their storyline kind of like works together, and I think that that is like a really cool talent and something that you can see in all of her books. I've read other books by her as well, and that's just something very evident. And so if you like a book that's very character based, Sarah Morgan is definitely the author for you. My final winter book recommendation is 5 Gold Rings by Kristen Bailey. Now, this book also sounds very like tropey, but it was done so well and so fun. I'm pretty sure I listened to it in one day. And essentially, Eve, she walks in to see that her boyfriend is cheating on her. In her anger, she throws all of the gifts that he'd purchased for Christmas out the window. And in doing so, ends up finding that there was a ring there that she assumed he intended to use to propose to her. And she works at a jeweler, and she sees that it's from her workplace. So she goes to her workplace, talks with her boss, who has kind of become like a mentor to her. And while she's there, she learns that 5 of the rings from the business have been sent to the wrong addresses, and it's Christmas Eve. So she has to figure out how to get them swapped, get them to the right people. And there's somebody who's there to help her, Joe, her coworker, who conveniently has always been in love with her. And so you can imagine kind of where the story goes, but they go on this quest to get these rings returned to the correct people, and you get to know the stories of the different couples as they're being delivered, which I think is really special as well. And it's sweet, it's funny, just not something that I've really read before, and so I really appreciated that about the story. Okay, now let's get into the winter books that are on my TBR for this December. The first one is Good Spirits by B.K. Borison. First of all, such a stunning cover, and like the sprayed edges. I think there are 2 different editions you could choose. One's green and one's red. I picked the red one because I thought it was just screaming like Christmas time, but I don't actually know a ton about this book. I love to go into books as blind as I can, sometimes meaning I don't even read the synopsis at all. But you may be seeing this book in an upcoming Bookmas episode, so keep your eyes out for it. I also would love to read Holiday Romance by Catherine Walsh. I have heard that this is a friends to lovers romance. Don't quote me on that. The second book in the series, Snowed In, might be the one that's friends to lovers. Either way, my friend Madeline, Mad's Library on Bookstagram, loved the book, recommended it to me, and I still haven't read it. So I'd really love to read it this year, because something about Madeline is she gives me the best recommendations, and so I think it's finally time. Next, we have Nick and Noelle's Christmas Playlist by Cody Hall. This is another friends to lovers romance, and not only that, it's part of a series, and I love a good series, especially when they're like cozy and fun like this. I don't love romance books just as its own genre. Like, I read them, but they tend to start feeling the same to me. However, when it's either a small town or it's an interconnected series, I love when you're able to see characters pop up again that you've already read about before. So this is definitely a high contender for me for this winter. Another one on my list is You Make It Feel Like Christmas by Toni Shiloh. All of these, except for Good Spirits and Holiday Romance, which I mentioned at the beginning, can be found on Hoopla, at least again for me. And so I recommend that you check because you might be able to utilize your library to read them. This book, however, is about Star, and she goes home for the holidays. She's not really looking forward to it. She's helping her sister with her wedding preparations and just does not really want to be there. But then her brother's best friend, he shows up and he's coming home to take care of his late mother's shop, to kind of keep it up and running. And she starts to not regret coming home as much. So that sounds very interesting as well. The final book on my list is The Book Club Hotel by Sarah Morgan. Now, I mentioned that I've read her before. This book I actually started 2 years ago, and I ended up DNFing it, which is a really big deal for me. I have a hard time DNFing books. And I actually read a good chunk of it, probably about 20%. Now, I think that I've learned with her books that I prefer to listen to them as audiobooks, and this one I started on my Kindle, so I think that I need to give it another try on audio, because then I can like color while doing it or do a puzzle, like just do something cozy, and like embrace the characters that way, because again, like her other books, it's following multiple people. In this case, I believe they're all women and they end up being part of a book club at this hotel. But yeah, it didn't really capture my interest at the beginning when I was originally reading it, but the synopsis and from what I've heard of other people who finished it, they've really loved it. And again, I know that like it's more character based and slow burn, and so I think it's something I need to give another chance, but maybe just again in a different format. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I hope that it was something that you enjoyed. If you decided to watch instead of just listen, let me know what you think. I am so curious to see how this all goes, but I'm excited to kind of challenge myself with this. So anyway, thank you for listening, and I will catch you in tomorrow's episode. Bye!